You know, you hear a lot of things at a State of the Union. You rarely hear derision. And the president got derision last night. Joined now by United States Senator Tom Cotton from the great state of Arkansas, who got the word last night that he's going to have to teach his 2 young boys to drive because we're still going to need oil in 10 years. So, Senator Cotton, I'm sure you were counting on teaching them in electric vehicles, and that's all they would ever drive. But the president broke the bad news last night. We're going to need oil in 10 years.
Given how reckless those boys on their 2 wheels right now, I'm not sure they're going to be getting behind 4 wheels later in life. It'll tone it down. It was pretty remarkable to hear the president admit that we need oil and gas for, just 10 years, Hugh. But in 2033, we can switch it all off. I'm sure that all the people out there thinking about investing in drilling or production or refineries that can run into the billions of dollars and have a multi-decade payoff period are now just chomping at the bit to go out and put their own money or their clients' money at risk, thinking that the Democrats in 2033 are going to shut them all down, as they've been threatening to do all along. This is one reason why we're facing a growing energy crisis in this country, is the Democrats are trying to strangle off investment in and growth of the oil and gas sector. But the truth of the matter is we're going to rely on the oil and gas forever, Hugh. There's almost certainly never going to be a time when we don't need oil and gas, not just to do things like power our vehicles, but to make clothes and plastics and other things that are based on petroleum.
It's really the dumbest thing he said last night among many dumb things. But, Senator, let's come back to that. I want to talk about your colleague in government, the new superstar of stage, screen, and television, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Boy, did she kill it in the response last night.
She did. Sarah did an outstanding job. She's off to a great start in her first month as governor. Our legislature is passing many important bills with many more to come. And I thought she had a very well-framed line that increasingly the choice in our politics is not between right and left, but between normal and crazy. There are a lot of folks in Arkansas who are historic Democrats who may even feel some sympathies towards their old Democratic party, but they realize that today's Democratic Party, especially in Washington, D.C., led by Joe Biden, is just pushing crazed left-wing ideologies on a country that just wants to lead a normal life, to,
now, Senator,
to raise their kids and worship their God.
You have been to a number of these. Your time in the House, your 7th year in the Senate, you've been to a number of State of the Unions. I don't think I've heard one as off the rails as this. And, of course, our left-wing friends in legacy media are saying, boy, you look good. And Nancy Pelosi said, with age comes wisdom. But, in fact, it's embarrassing. And national security threats. I was with your old friend, Mike Pompeo, last night. I think you two are going to be slightly competitive when it comes to book sales, your book being Only the Strong and his book, Tough, Never Give an Inch. And I think he may have sold more than you in the first week. But we were talking about you behind your back and whether or not you will brave the cold of the Army-Navy game up in Massachusetts next year. But what is the deal about the lack of seriousness in his speech after Secretary Pompeo said last night, the Chinese just transited our most secure parts without interdiction and covered in a bodyguard of lies about what happened for a week? Why wouldn't the president at least talk about it last night?
Well, first off, Mike's new book, Never Give an Inch, is great. It's a deserved bestseller. I hope all your listeners have gotten a copy to read it. It's an inside account of what happened in the Trump administration from someone who was there from beginning to end, and also a very sober look at the face, unlike President Biden's State of the Union address. You know,
yes.
I was watching the clock in the chamber, and I think we passed an hour before he even mentioned China or Russia and Iran at all. It's almost like they put the speech to bed Sunday afternoon at Camp David and celebrated over some ice cream. And then someone said, hey, Mr. President, we forgot to say anything about the threats our nation faces. So they tacked on 2 minutes of perfunctory comments at the end. And, I mean, Joe Biden ended up spending more time on baggage fees than he did the Chinese communists, probably the gravest threat our nation has ever faced to our way of life. I suspect that's in part because he didn't want to highlight, a humiliating moment for America when a spy balloon last week became a trial balloon testing Joe Biden's strength and resolution, and obviously he came up lacking. I can assure your listeners, by the way, having gotten more information about the circumstance, that we could have easily shot this balloon down over the oceans. It was not much more than directing a pilot with the command fire. Yet Joe Biden's indecision and his fearfulness of ever doing anything that would offend China, as you saw again last night, when he talked about them as if they were like a high school basketball rival, a competitor, not a mortal threat to our way of life, allowed him or caused him to allow this balloon to float on its merry way all across the middle of the country.
Appeasers are going to appease, Senator Cotton. Now, one of the things Secretary Pompeo said last night is he is disgusted. I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the transcript in front of me. He's disgusted by people saying, oh, they've got spy satellites that can see everything anyway, so no big deal. He said it's a 3-bus size array of electronic equipment, the likes of which we have no idea what was in there. It could have been weaponized, could have had anything in it. And making light of it is exactly the wrong response. You agree or disagree with him?
No, you should not make light of it. I know I've heard several people dismiss it as a 300 or 400-year-old battlefield technology, but there are plenty of reasons why a nation would like to use a balloon in this fashion. So first off, it just stands to reason to you, you don't even need an engineering background to understand that you have better resolution on images and better fidelity on electronic collection at 11 miles than you do at 200 miles. Just common sense.
Senator, do we know if they dropped anything along the way? I'm just wondering if they had little mini parachutes of little mini collection devices. Did we keep it 24/7 eyes on?
Not to my knowledge, Hugh. But again, you raise a good point. It's fine for the intelligence agencies and the Department of Defense say we don't think this gave any capability beyond their satellites, but we don't really know until we can collect all the debris and hopefully put together exactly what that balloon was carrying. We don't really know what it had. But, even, Hugh, if you assume that it had cameras and other equipment that gave no added capabilities what their satellites have, there's still sound reasons for a nation to do something like this. China believes that we will target their satellites as they will target our satellites in the early stages of any potential conflict. Therefore, these balloons, if fully tested and rolled out for them, will provide a significant redundant and resilient capability to provide exactly what their satellites otherwise provide. So there are a lot of reasons for China to have done this, sound reasons of statecraft. And for Joe Biden or anyone else to make light of it or just assume it's no big deal is very risky.
I think he's got the worst speechwriting staff in the history of the modern White House because this line, they just did not anticipate how this line would go over. The fentanyl devastation is because the border is open and the Sinaloa cartel using precursor chemicals from Mexico is flooding the country with fentanyl. The president uses the wrong number and he gets some pushback and he seems surprised. Cut number 19.
Fentanyl is killing more than 70,000 Americans a year. You got it.
It's your fault. Now, if the president was nimble, he would say something like, the failure at the border is generational, and we have to do something about it, but fentanyl is a bipartisan problem. He didn't. He was confused, and he smiled. Senator Cotton, there's no getting away from this. He's trying to preempt criticism of the border by talking about it. Will that work, in your view?
No, Hugh, I don't think it will. And the fact that we're losing over 100,000 Americans a year to drug deaths just highlights how dangerous our border is. As I've said before to your audience, you should ask yourself what you would do, what you think our government should do, more to the point, if ISIS or Al-Qaeda set up shop in Juarez or Monterrey or Tijuana and was killing over 100,000 Americans a year. And that's exactly what we should do to these cartels. Yet Joe Biden refuses to protect our borders, which is the most basic kind of national security. Border security is. Also, I got to say that the Democratic Party's, relentless leniency towards criminals, hardened criminals, drug traffickers, also contributes to the drug deaths we see in this country. If people think they can get away with trafficking large amounts of dangerous drugs, you're going to have more drug traffickers. And Democrats have been trying to empty out our prisons and reduce drug trafficking sentences, and in some cases even legalizing the transit of hard drugs in this country for years.
Senator, I want to close on this. You've got little boys. I've got little boy grandchildren, and I think the president's got little boy great-grandchildren. Can you actually see him running for president? I mean, that was an infirm presentation by an old man last night. I'm trying to be genteel. I don't think he has dementia. I just think he's old. Can you see him going through a campaign and doing debates that actually are real debate? I just don't see it happening.
No, Hugh. I mean, Joe Biden stumbled through the 2020 campaign in his basement. I don't think he could have survived that campaign, probably not even the primary, if he had to be on the campaign trail interacting with voters and reporters on a constant basis, as will be the case next year should he run. It's very hard to imagine Joe Biden making it through a year and a half on the campaign trail, much less 6 more years in office. He simply does not have, at 80 years old, the mental and physical capacity to continue in the hardest job in the world, and certainly won't at 86 either. And I think most Americans recognize that. And if he's the Democratic nominee, they're going to factor that into their consideration in voting.
Absolutely the case. Senator Tom Cotton, always a pleasure. Remember, those boys are going to have to use oil, so you better get the bumper car ready. I'm pretty sure they're great on the skateboard, but they're going to have to wear crash helmets if they're like my boys when they learn how to drive. There are going to be 3 wrecks in everybody's life. Most of them occur between 16 and 18, and hopefully they'll be fender benders. Thank you, Senator Cotton.